Okay, so I'm first going to ask you your name and your pronouns, when you graduated from Simmons, and what you majored or minored in.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Hiba Hashim. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I graduated from Simmons University with my MPH in May 2025, so last summer. And I majored in health equity.
Amazing. Thank you. So Hiba, what was your service learning placement and what class was it for?
Yeah, absolutely. My service learning placement was with Justices Global, and so I was working on a global vaccine equity campaign, and it was for my MHEO 465 class, which was health advocacy and community organizing, and I feel like it was the perfect fit because I got to address working with community partners and figure out how grassroots organization fits into public health work.
So what kind of work did you end up doing as part of that placement?
Yeah, I think Justice Global was such an interesting organization because it was made up of advocates, it was made up of policymakers, researchers, medical professionals. So it was cool coming into the space and seeing like how in a field like public health, different perspectives come together to work on one solution. And so I specifically worked on the vaccine equity campaign, and this was in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So around like the 2020 time, 2021 vaccines, of course, the world kind of shut down, and then these pharmaceutical companies were scrambling to come up with vaccines. And Johnson and Johnson was one of the vaccine companies that was publicly funded, and so U.S. taxpayer dollars went into the creation of this vaccine. And yet, after the COVID pandemic kind of started dying down, at least in the States, a lot of these vaccines were kind of wasted. There were like about 2 million doses that were just thrown away, which could have either been sent over to the countries in the global south or they could have been repurposed in some way. The technology also could have been shared with other countries, and it wasn't. And so a lot of American citizens were upset, and global citizens were upset because they needed the help and support. And so this pandemic continued a lot longer than it needed to. And that's kind of where Justices Global came in and I came in. And we wanted to see how we can advocate to open up these like intellectual property rights and share our technologies that way something like this doesn't happen in the future.
Right. So it was kind of like like a lot of policy work, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a lot of grassroots organization. We
Mm,
had a lot of people in DC, for example, put together rallies.
mm,
And then they wanted to come up with like policy memos that we could send to local congressmen and women and have them kind of advocate to amend the Bayh-Dole Act, which was like the
mm,
law, one of the main laws that kind of balances intellectual property rights with commercial interests, and to see how we can fix this for like future biomedical advances.
mm. So what was your experience engaging with the communities that you worked with? Like what experience did you have kind of grassroots organizing, either with the organization itself or with the communities they were trying to impact?
I think it was really interesting because it's difficult work. It's like difficult to get people to care about it. As soon
Mm,
as the pandemic started going away and things started opening up, like people wanted to forget. And so it's sometimes hard to be like, this is still important work. And I think public health is a lot of pre-planning. It's like thinking ahead. How can we be prepared for the next time this happens? And so sometimes that can just look like we're constantly following up with people. It was a lot of like practicing how to do cold calls and send emails. Putting together the rallies, for example, is a lot of project management and logistics work that I think as a young grad student, you don't realize that it's just like it's more minute and like detail oriented than you would expect it to be. And then it was also interesting to kind of shift our work online. I know that with the pandemic, pre-pandemic, a lot of things were in person and like rallies were really big. And then after COVID happened, people were a little nervous to gather together, especially when we're working on vaccine equity. So how do we shift and communicate these important topics online and create public health campaigns that people will care about and actually engage with? And so that was kind of what sparked my interest, at least in my public health work, to see like where does that communications work come in.
cool. So yeah, I mean, talking about kind of your own personal interest, what impact do you feel like the service learning had on your education at Simmons?
I think the advocacy part one was really important to me. because it just made me realize that you can't really speak for a community until you engage with them. So us like actually going out and asking people how did like the policy process look like? Why are these acts in place to begin with? We got to kind of see both sides of like how is this process funded, and then also speak to people like in the global south who struggled a lot more with the pandemic and loss of life. And so that was something that I've definitely carried forward into my work in public health. I work at the Boston Public Health Commission right now, and for a teen dating violence program. And we always make sure that we're not speaking for the teens and thinking that we know better than them. It's a lot of like, what do you think? And like, you speak first, and then we'll figure out what resources we can put together. And so that definitely impacted my professional development. Secondly, I think it made me find my niche. I've always really been interested in writing and journalism, and then I was pre-med, and then I found public health, and somehow was able after this service learning project to find my niche in like how do you communicate scientific findings in a way that's engaging to like the average person, and so finding like marketing and public health and something in between.
Mm, yeah, no, thank you so much. And you yeah, are already on to the next question, which is how has service learning at Simmons kind of informed your professional development, and how has it or how did it change your perspective moving forward from that experience?
Yeah, I think before the service learning, like as I was I worked with Here for Justice as well, which is Simmons' student advocacy group. And so we did a lot of social media posts on various campaigns, whether it was like maternal health or the pandemic. And it was kind of hard to see like we're so passionate about the work that we do. We've put together all these concepts, but we get 10 likes on Instagram or like a view on Facebook. And we're doing these Facebook Lives and no one's watching them. And so it's been really interesting for me to see how we can communicate it in an innovative way. And so, like in my work now, we use memes, we use humor, we're on TikTok. And so it's been kind of cool to see how can we use communication strategies like commercially. Like, for example, companies like Duolingo do a great job of seeming very like engaging and open and like Gen Z. And so, how can public health look like that? And my service learning project was like my first experience with that. And like, how can we make toolkits and things that people will actually engage with beyond just public health professionals?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, sounds like really informative, a really informative experience for you. And thank you so much for sharing all about it.